So yes, in the San Francisco Chronicle front page, there's one other article about Wells Fargo account grows. I received so many phone calls today and emails about this particular issue, because this is something I did bring up a long time ago. So I didn't even know where to start. So I guess in 1999, and I worked for a very small bank, and I loved being a teller. So I started as a teller. I loved being a teller. I loved the customer interaction. And eventually I started wanting to know more, and I was bilingual, and we had a very large Hispanic population. So then they started teaching me about how to open accounts and how to do loans. And I just became so popular because every single Hispanic was coming to me to open an account. And I would take the time to explain exactly how it works, because for most Hispanics, we don't understand how a checking and savings account work. In Mexico, they don't trust banks. So people just hold it under their mattress, or they just keep it, and everything's paid in cash. So it was just a different culture shock for most people, so I had to do a lot of training. And then eventually in 2008, Pam Rubio, who is the manager, the branch manager for Wells Fargo in St. Helena, she wanted me to come work for her. And so I did. I was a little hesitant at first because I knew Wells Fargo had a very bad reputation. But nonetheless, I took the job. So I was doing the same thing, but getting paid a little bit more. So I went through about a month worth of training at a whole different branch. And most of the training consisted on ethics and what to do if something were to happen. So it was just so much of that that I was like, okay, I want to get back to work. Okay, send me to the branch. But here again, there's another thing, and you have to sign this handbook and acknowledgement that we went over the code of ethics, and you know, here's the ethics hotline. So much of that that when I went back to the branch, immediately I started noticing that there was things happening. Strange things to most people. You know, somebody would come in and say, oh, I got another debit card, but my debit card's not expired, and I didn't order one. Why did I get one? Or all of a sudden, you know, it's like, here's 4 more debit cards. Why did I get them? Or, oh, I got this on the mail, and it says to sign and return. What is this? So it was new accounts that were opened without the customer's knowledge. So that went on for about 1 to 2 weeks when I said, something's up, something's not okay. So then I called my trainer, because I was familiar with my trainer, and I said, remember what you said to do if we notice these things happening? So she said, bring it to your manager's attention. So I did, and they called it a misunderstanding, and then it kind of got corrected for a little bit, but then it went back to more and more and more. So all of a sudden, instead of me opening accounts, I had my own customer service, you know, claims line, because all I was doing is fixing everybody else's mistakes, honest mistakes. So at one point, I just said, you can't make the same mistake 30 times. So something's happening, and I don't think that you're listening to what I'm trying to say. I think this is intentional. And pretty soon, I started noticing a pattern. Most of these people were Hispanic. Most of these people were undocumented. And then whenever I'd say, well, let me have you talk to my manager so you can explain what's happening, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want any problem. I don't want that girl that opened that account or that guy that opened my account, I don't want him or her to get in trouble. No, it's okay. So that was it. But then other regular people were coming in and say, you know, I'm starting to get calls from collection agencies saying that I owe about $120. What was that for? So then I do the investigation and do the research. Come to find out that there were accounts open that every single month were being service charged. So after about 6 months of a service charge going into a checking and savings account and a credit card, then they decide, well, this customer is no longer needing this account, so they're going to charge this account off, and they're going to send it to collection agency. So then we have the collection agency calling and harassing customers. At that point, so that's 6 months later, you come back, and that person that first opened the account is like, oh, well, remember you wanted to open that? And they're like, no, I didn't request that. So, you know, it was just like an everyday thing. So then I started reporting it more and more. You know, it's not fair. I can't open my accounts because I'm solving somebody else's, cleaning up their mess. So what they would do is they would punish me. So if anybody walks into a Wells Fargo, they have the door greeters. Hi, welcome to Wells Fargo. Coming in. How can I help you? Do you have a deposit, straight deposit? So then I couldn't do my sales because I was too busy being their door greeter. And the people that were committing all the fraud and with all the opening and closing accounts, they were exempt from being door greeters. So being a vocal person, I said, that's not fair. Why do I get to do 3 hours a day? Be fair and ask everybody else to do an hour. So sometimes it would work. Other times they're like, just do it. So I would do it. And then I am from a town called St. Helena in the Napa Valley. It's a town of 5,000 people, or back there, 2008, 5,000 people. Wells Fargo had 5 bankers. And every banker had to open 8 accounts a day. So do the math. That's 40 accounts a day, every single day. So if you have 5,000 residents, and we have to open 40 accounts a day, it will take us 125 days to give an account to every single person in St. Helena. Now, take into account that there's 13 or 14 other banks in St. Helena, very wealthy. And the next bank to the next city is about 10 miles away, and it's full of banks, one way, and the other way, same thing. So then you start, asking yourself, how have they been in business for so long? So it continued, and it progressively started getting worse. And they hired a new person, and I was in charge of training the new employees and the new bankers. And she was a little different than most of us, and there was nothing wrong with her, but she was a little bit more reserved, I guess. And so it took a little bit to break through to her. But one of the first things that she did say, she noticed what was happening. And when she said that, I was relieved. Whew, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that's seeing these things. So she's very educated. She's definitely overqualified for this job, and she's noticing these things as well. So then after coming to the managers would come, and they would always be right behind me. It's almost like if they were my shadow. If I went to the restroom, they came to the restroom to see who I was talking with. If I was on the phone, they'd be, what's going on? Who are you talking to? My daughter's daycare called one day, and she has fever, so I have to go pick her up. So they made it almost impossible for me to leave because I had to do my paperwork. With every account that you open, there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done. And again, I had to do it, but the other star bankers were not required to do that, but I was. So I was late for my daughter's daycare, and then they said, that's weird. We just got a call from your boss asking if it was true that your daughter was feverish. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So, those kinds of things. Also, right in the same shopping center where the Wells Fargo is located in St. Helena, there's that corner where a lot of illegal immigrants congregate, and they're looking for someone, day laborers, thank you. And so they, if the day was low and there was no sales, they say, Jesse, go over there, unbutton your shirt, shake your skirt, and go bring some people to come open accounts. And I'd be like, excuse me? So they did all kinds of things. And so.
Did they really do that?
They did. Oh, they did. Trust me, they did. So that went on, and then it just got really bad to the point where I was like, I'm going to go to the hymn book because this has got to be illegal. So I learned the word retaliation then when I went to the employee hymn book. So I finally did tell my boss, I think you're retaliating against me. I think that's really what's happening. Because this is not normal. You don't do things to me that you do things to me that you don't do to others. So something's happening, and I think it's because I've been reporting that this is happening. So at one point they thought that I was making things up. But then I started getting like, okay, well, you have a complaint, write it down, sign here, give me your contact information, and I'll have somebody contact you. So I would keep a copy, and then I'd give the other copy or the original to my manager. So I collected a pretty big stack of affidavits, or somebody in their own handprint and signature and contact information that was happening. Then I would go into the computer and print a profile. So then you'd find, I print so-and-so, and it's got 30 accounts. So you see checking account, savings account open one day, closed about 2 days later. And then you see on the same day that these were closed, you start the new one, and then so on and so forth. So somebody was ending up with 30 accounts. I have a friend that when the whole scandal with Wells Fargo broke out, he sent me a picture, and he must have had like 24 different checkbooks. And he still has them. I said, why are you keeping them? I don't know. But it's true, and I have those pictures. So it just got to a point where it was just very, very difficult to come to work, and I really enjoyed what I did for a living. So I contacted an attorney, and I started saying, hey, this is happening. So what do I do? And eventually, me and that same lady, her name is Judy, we filed a lawsuit against Wells Fargo. I think we were the second people that took legal action against Wells Fargo. I have not met the first person, and unfortunately, we lost our case. We lost it despite all the evidence that we had and all the printouts. Well, Wells Fargo is very powerful, and that's really what it boils down to. We lost our lawsuit because they said, well, when you were hired to work for Wells Fargo, you knew you had to do sales. And sales. So you had to sell those checking accounts. But I was like, well, I'm suing for that same reason. How can you say that? So I don't know, just in my wild dreams, I hope that one day I get to talk to one-on-one to that judge and say, do you remember me? Do you remember when I brought that forward and you thought that we lost, and you thought that wasn't worthy of a lawsuit? So we appealed, and unfortunately we lost again. I don't think that my attorney did the best job that he could at the time. About late September, when the whole Wells Fargo scandal broke out again, I started getting a lot of calls from the New York Times, from the San Francisco Chronicle, and all these reporters. And I'm like, how are they getting my name? So then they said, well, you were on the news. And when John Stump was being interrogated by a lot of the senators, one of the senators said my name. And because John Stump said, well, I don't know, I think I didn't learn about it until 2013. But then Senator Merkley said, no, there was a lady in St. Helena, California, back in 2008, 2009 that told you. So I have that email where I told Stump. So he was lying under oath. To work for a bank, you have to be fingerprinted. You have to have clear the background check, and you have to have good credit. You have to be a good, decent person. And just like Steve said, but I guess they only apply those rules to the working people, not the executives. Nothing's happened to John Stump. He just resigned. If a teller's out $20 at the end of the night when they balance their drawer, they can have charges filed against them for that. But what's happened to this guy? What's happened to all the managers? And the reason why they're doing all these accounts is because for every account that you open, you get money. So if you open a checking account, that's $8, $15, $25, depending on the checking account that they've opened for you. If you open a savings account, that's another $5. If you have a debit card, that's another $3. So for every customer that would walk in the door, you can easily make about $100 per customer on top of your salary. So that's why a lot of these people were okay doing it. And then when it gets low, then you have your branch manager, how many accounts do you have? Do you don't have your 8? How are you going to come up with your 8? Do you need to do something about it? So in YouTube, there's a lot of videos, and they're cartoon videos, but I assure you that's really what happened. Every single morning, they were asking you, how many accounts do you commit to? So everybody would say, 8, 8, 8. And I'd be the only one that says, no, 3. How, come on, Jesse, you're not a team player. Well, I am, but how am I going to get 8? I can barely think that I can do 3. Again, St. Helena, 5,000 residents, how am I going to get 8 accounts every single day? So if you want real accounts, I'll commit to 3. I can't commit to 8 because there's no way I'm going to do it. So even to this day, that branch manager, she denies everything that happened. She's still employed by Wells Fargo. They just sent her to a different branch where there's no customer interaction. That was her punishment. But then there was a big article in the St. Helena Star saying, oh, she's been promoted to work with private banking customers. So those are the high, yeah, it's very expensive. So she does no customer interaction. If you go today to a Wells Fargo and you say, oh, I want to open an account, but I forgot my ID, don't worry. It's kind of like salespeople with the car dealerships. Don't worry, bad credit, no worries. We'll open one for you. We'll pretend that you have a Mexican consulate card.
Is it still going on?
It's still going on. Just today I got a call from Univision. That's a Hispanic TV station. Yeah. And they did an interview probably October of last year. And they were so busy wanting to get the word out. Oh, yeah, Wells Fargo, and there's Yesenia, and she did say something about it. But that's really all they said. They really didn't cover my whole story. Well, that same guy today, he called me. And I said, remember, I told you you need to make emphasis on the fact that these accounts are being opened for people that cannot be verified. All the other banks have regulations, and everybody has to follow the Patriot Act. So that's where the government says, in order for you to open an account or have a loan, you need to have this form of ID and this form of ID, and there's a big list that they tell you these are the acceptable forms of ID. We all have to do that when we work. We have to fill out the W4, I think, where the information you have to have valid proof of ID. Same thing applies to the bank, except for Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is exempt from doing that, so I don't understand why. I don't understand how come they haven't been fined for opening accounts for a lot of these people that they cannot be verified. So a terrorist can open an account at Wells Fargo and he didn't even have an ID. And they were just so easy. It was just so easy to open an account. So if you go to the Wells Fargo branch in St. Helena or Sonoma or anywhere around here, those people are still there. And the people that we spoke up and we said, hey, this is happening, you should watch out because I think this is bad, this is fraud. Those are the people that we're no longer there. OSHA. So probably my last interview, because even talking about all these things, they bring me back headaches, and it just, I remember that tension and just, you know, it was just really, really ugly. So on the very last interview that I did, because I said I don't want to talk about it anymore, I'm done. I just want to go back to normal. I really do. The reporter said, did you hear about OSHA? And I said, no. Well, did you hear someone said that they were the OSHA inspectors or the claim person to handle your claim? I said, no. I didn't know because I'm not the attorney. I don't know what steps have to be filed in order for you to file a lawsuit. But it turns out that in order for me to file the lawsuit, you first have to go through OSHA, which is kind of like one hurdle. And they make this very, very difficult. So I found out that my OSHA case was never investigated. It just sat on somebody's desk for 6 months. And after somebody found it, they gave it to Daryl Whitman, who's unfortunately not here today. And they said, close that case immediately. Don't ask any questions. He did. But he just thought, it's funny, that doesn't feel good. It's not right. Something's not right about that. And he looked at it and he said, oh, it's Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo didn't even respond to the accusations on that report. So he just found it odd. So he remembered my name. So when that article came on the news, he remembered me. So it was through this reporter that I was able to connect with him, and he specifically remembered my case. So I've been, you know, the more time that goes by, the more I learn about it, and you know, the things that I know now, I wish I knew then, and maybe the results of my lawsuit would be different. My attorney has helped other people with similar cases, and I believe his other person that filed the lawsuit through his firm was the second person that got a settlement through OSHA. OSHA ordered for her to receive a payout. So it's just very unfortunate that it's not me, but I'm really happy that finally something's happening. I've been writing to the Department of Labor. I've been writing to OSHA, and I've been saying, well, you didn't treat me fairly. You need to go back and do what you were supposed to do a long time ago. I really deserve that. They said no over and over again. So I've been trying and trying. So unfortunately, nothing has happened. I also recently contacted the Mexican consulate, and I said, listen, I'm really concerned because you've obviously been hearing everything that's going on with Wells Fargo. But the Mexican consulate has partnered with Wells Fargo so that the Mexican consulate issues the IDs and Wells Fargo opens the accounts. And so the Mexican consulate maybe is saying, yeah, we're doing it, you know, as a service to our Mexican citizens, but I don't know that they fully understand what these customers are going through Wells Fargo. So I talked to them. There was really nothing that they could do. They just said, well, we have the best of intentions, and we don't really work with other banks. And I said, I know. And the reason why you don't work with other banks is because the other banks won't allow you to open an account with a Mexican matricular card. So there's a lot that's going on. Hopefully something happens. And my point is for people just to be aware that this is happening and don't let it happen to you. And especially for those people that are being targeted. They're the less educated. They're afraid to be reported and deported. And with everything that's going on politically in our country, tension's high. And so they just sweep it under the rug, and that's it. So thank you very much.
Have any politicians helped you at all?
I did reach out to several of them. In fact, Senator Merkley, who's out of Oregon, I wrote to him, no response. I just get added into their mass mailing stuff, so I get a lot of their emails. I was contacted by someone from California, and then they had to postpone my appointment, and then they've never called me since.
You should call them back.
I do. I have something on my phone that it tracks all the reports that talk about Wells Fargo. So every report that comes out, I know about, I read it. Steve is really good too. He sends it to me. So most of the times I've already read them, or I have them, or if I haven't, I'll read his. I haven't connected with anyone that would really listen, and that's really all I want. I want someone to listen and take me serious. I just don't want someone to put a picture on the paper and say, oh, this is the person. I want something to be done about it. I don't care about the newspaper. I don't care about the interviews. I just want people to understand what's happening and prevent it and stop it once and for all.
I think what I'd like to talk about is not necessarily case-specific information. That's been covered in pretty good detail with a lot of the New York Times articles, financial planning, and others. I think what I'd like to talk about is go a little bit into my background and discuss the actual implications to the individuals or to the American public at large. I began in finance in 1990. I had worked for Bank of America for quite some time. In 2000, I opened my own financial planning and investment management firm. Did that for a little over a decade. Like many others, I got caught up in some of the financial issues that come around in 2008, 2009, and 10, and people lost a ton of money, and frankly, I'm one of those as well. I think, looking in retrospect, who knows? I mean, if we all had we all have 20/20 hindsight. Foresight's a whole different deal. But I think that I began to work for J.P. Morgan in June of 2010. And when I began at J.P. Morgan, I started with an investment portfolio that was about $10 million. Over the subsequent 2.5 years, I grew that portfolio somewhere into $100 million. Now, I did that the old-fashioned way. I did that by taking care of my clients, because that is ultimately what's most important by me. If you take care of the people that I work with, and I work specifically in a retirement community, so many of you here could very well have been a client of mine. The people that I am trying to help protect are you. They are your friends. They are your family. They are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, your sisters. And, what ends up happening, I think sometimes people lose sight of fines. You know, we hear these fines, banks paying billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in fines. But those fines have faces and they have names. You may not know them because they're maybe embarrassed to say something. But to go back just a little bit, you know, I work for JP Morgan. What they ended up, or what they wanted us to do, was push our clients into what are called proprietary products. Now, a proprietary product could have been a mutual fund, but in most cases, it had to do with something that was called Chase Strategic Portfolio. It is directly an investment managed product that's managed by the bank, and then the bank would stuff that mutual fund, or excuse me, stuff that managed portfolio with their own mutual funds. In some cases, up to 83.5% of their own accounts. So in essence, they're double dipping. They're charging you a fee to manage the product, and then they're getting a fee to manage the mutual fund in the product. When there are additional accounts that could have been had for much, much less as far as the fees were concerned. Well, that brings me to just prior to my promotion. So in June, I was June of 2012, well, I should go back, January 30th or 31st of 2012, I had a meeting with 3 managers. And those 3 managers I have recorded. I actually recorded the conversations. I've given them to regulators, multiple regulators, mind you. And they're telling me to push these proprietary products, in essence, if I want to get a promotion. And they say something to the effect of, well, you understand that, you know, bank managed, you know, this account, the accounts that you'll be selling are all bank managed products. Well, that's not ethical. And from a financial perspective, as a fiduciary in a managed account, we must do what is in the best interest of the client. Not that we want to or that we should, we are required by the law to do that. And anyhow, long story short, I get promoted. I had only been in the job less than 30 days, and my direct manager at the time had come to me and said, hey, you're not selling enough managed accounts. You know, how many accounts have you opened? And at that time, I'd only opened 1. Mind you, I've been transferring in $3, $4, $5 million in big blocks of cash, and they are still just hounding on me to get these accounts moved over to these managed products. Well, long story short, I told them to shove it in an email. I was a little more polite than that, though. And I just told them I'm not going to breach my fiduciary duties to the clients. I'm just not going to do it. Literally 2 weeks later, there's an alleged transaction that they say, oh, you mismarked a trade. Well, unfortunately for them, the client sided with me, and they've since signed affidavits stating that that was completely false. Anyhow, long story short, I ended up getting terminated November 6th of 2012. And I knew what was going on. I didn't fall off a turnip truck. I kind of seen the writing on the wall. I was just hoping that they would leave me alone by going to the management team, but unfortunately they didn't. So they terminate me. Then they write up my securities license with these allegations for allegedly why they terminated me, and that ultimately blacklists somebody from the industry. You can't go hire at another brokerage firm. So you have a $100 million book of business. The bank wants to retain that book of business. So what do? They write up your securities license so you can't go license somewhere else and then transfer your book of business over. Now, FINRA, you guys know about this. I've brought it to your attention and many, many other regulatory agencies, so at some point, hopefully, you guys will listen. So the firm, I went to the media in March of 2013. It was the front page of the New York Times. And they chronicle the processes over at JP Morgan fairly well. It's called Selling the Home Brand. It's a great article written by Sue Craig. I think at that point, they were probably not too happy because within the next 60 days, I had 3 written client complaints against me. Now, that's interesting because in the prior 20-some odd years, I'd never had a written disclosable complaint on my securities license, ever. Now all of a sudden 3 pop up. I think, wow, that's interesting. Okay. So I file a complaint. We must go through FINRA arbitration, unfortunately. I lose in arbitration. I went, how on God's earth can that happen? We had HR documents stating that I was terminated. They made the decision to terminate me, or the decision to terminate me, on November 2nd. For documents they found on November 3rd. So either they have ESP, or, you know, I just don't know how 1 and 1 equal 2. So we lose. Okay, so I lick my wounds and I move on. We'd also, back in April of 2013, had filed a OSHA retaliation case, and that's how I come to ultimately meet Yesenia and a few other folks. But I lose the case. I think, well, you know what? That really stinks. I'll be honest, I wasn't real too happy about it. Come to find out, the person that testified under oath, she is, quote, the corporate officer, end of quote, and, quote, the supervisory manager, end of quote, for J.P. Morgan Chase. She is the voice of J.P. Morgan, okay? She is J.P. Morgan, mind you. She said under oath, absolutely not. Nobody for J.P. Morgan had ever drafted client complaints. Well, that's wrong. I know it's wrong because I went and talked to those clients after the case. Every person alive has signed an affidavit stating what they said was false. More importantly, one of the clients cannot read or write. So, ask yourself, person signs these documents that can't read or write. Well, that's interesting. So, you would think that would be the end of it, but it's not. As time goes on, you know, we fight. Long story short, I end up winning the OSHA retaliation complaint. I ended up, you know, somewhere in the mid 6 figures for damages. I appealed the award, not J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan didn't appeal it, I appealed it. And the people go, are you crazy? Why would you appeal that? Well, because they owe me over $2 million in wages. So the answer is, I'm not somebody that is going to just sit back. I'm like many of you in the union. At some point, you have to stand up for what you believe is right. You have to stand up for the American people. If one person doesn't stand up, it's not my job. Well, guess what? We all lose. So what it really comes down to is the people have to take back or force the situation in some instances. And I think maybe I don't know that I'm that guy. I'm just a normal person. You know, I'm no different than any of you. And I just want to go to work. I want to do what's right by my clients and make an honest living. I don't know what's so difficult about that. And the accounts they had us selling, to kind of put this in perspective, could generate 1,067% more recurring revenue to the firm. 1,067%. That is not a typo. Almost 11 times the revenue. So you wonder how firms like J.P. Morgan make $100 billion a year? That's how. It don't take a rocket scientist to figure that, you know, if you're making $10 billion, for example, and you could generate another, you know, 10-fold increase, you're at 100. So the thing that's interesting, and when I say J.P. Morgan, you know, we're talking about a huge global institution, literally largest in the United States, I think it is, by assets. And not every person at the firm is deceitful. There are a lot of good advisors. There are a lot of good people, just like you and me and whomever. It's not that. As Yesenia had talked about, it's the management team. It's those people that control the capability to do right by people. They do not pay a price. Their price is their annual bonus. What are they getting a bonus, right? So what did you receive in stock options or stock grants? You know, you cash out the register, cha-ching, when you get retired. And those are the ones that push these rules and these sales to the minions, you know, to the people in the field. And that really is what it's about. So the people need to stand up and they need to take it back. They need to say enough is enough. And I think that if those in the political power, those with the political will to do what's right by the American people, President Trump had mentioned that, you know, he wanted to do what's right by the American people. Well, now's your time. So President Trump, if you want to make real effective change, do not change Dodd-Frank. Do not repeal Dodd-Frank in whole.
But you know he doesn't want to do that.
Well, strengthen Sarbanes-Oxley. You know, strengthen the laws that help protect the American consumer. Don't repeal them, because that's not what this is about. This is about the American people being taken advantage of by a select few, the 1%. So what we need to do is we need to work together and make sure that the American people are cared for. There are a lot of people that are retired, and we're going to have a lot of baby boomers like many of you folks here. You want to know that somebody is looking out for your best interest, and that is what's important. So I think if we look at each other, and you look at the person next to you, look at the person to the right of you, look at the person behind you, those are the people that were, in essence, the reason for the fine. $307 million J.P. Morgan was fined for proprietary products issues. And there was a $60 million disgorgement by the CFTC. The SEC has done their job. The CFTC has done their job. FINRA, where are you? Not a single person has been reprimanded for those activities. Not a single manager for J.P. Morgan has been reprimanded for those activities, at least publicly. However, FINRA found fit to come after me, the person who went directly to their doorstep and said, hey guys, look at what I see going on here. And what do? They come after me because I made a $623.56 mistake. $367 million paid to the SEC and to the CFTC. Zero J.P. Morgan people have been disciplined. However, the self-regulatory organization known as FINRA decided to come after me for $623.56. Good job, guys. I hope you sleep well. So, what I have to say is that we need to stand together. We need to stand together as the American people. We need to press and push our congressmen. We met with some folks from California today, congressional members, and we're hoping that we can take this fight all the way to Washington. Something needs to change, and change starts with one person. Am I that person? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I can tell you this, I will not bow down to the wealthy at the expense of the weak. Just not who I am.